Hello everybody, Rackner here. Welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links video for the channel. In this video, I wanted to talk about and share my thoughts for the most recent KC Cup event this past weekend. I did manage to get a decent amount of playtime with it, as you can see here. And it was something that I was super satisfied with. I wanted to share with you my thoughts on it, as well as give you the deck list that I used to reach this far, and give you my thoughts on the matchups and card choices. So as you can see here, I managed to hit 23k. This was a pretty good milestone for me as a Yu-Gi-Oh player. I really was happy with myself here. I did want to climb a bit higher, but there was some issues at work that prevented me from doing so. I had to go in on my days, both of my days off, so I couldn't play this as much as I had liked. Sunday was actually supposed to be a huge grind stream for KC Cup, but I wasn't able to get that pulled off. So this was on my own. I managed to get to 23k, and before I could lose all of these points and not climb back up, I decided to sit myself here and hold up at this rank. As you can see, it's top 2000 in global, 1775 to be exact, and then this is also top 300 in North America. Here's the benchmark for top 300, and I'm 23k, so I'm right here in the middle of top 3, top 2. So really good stuff. I was really happy with myself, and I played 65 duels, and I won 67% of them, being 44. So I was really happy with myself. This is a really this is something that I'm satisfied with, and even though I did wish to climb a bit higher, I wanted something closer to 30,000. I'm still pretty satisfied with how I played in my performance here. I was really satisfied with all of my wins. When I did lose, I noticed how bad the misplays were, how big they were, and I managed to kind of catch those misplays and not make them again. So I was really satisfied. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the deck that I used. As you may expect, I'm a huge hero fan, and I did manage to get the Masked Heroes, so I played the Masked Heroes Fusion deck. There are two versions of the Masked Hero deck. There's one where it's Beatdown, in which you run 3 Celestial, 3 Decider, and 3 Drill Dark. That version of the deck is somewhat consistent, but unfortunately it's very linear in its win condition. Your opponent will know that once you lose all of your mask changes, there's pretty much nothing you can do at that point. And so I feel like it's not as efficient as it could, as this version of the Masked Heroes is. And so I really like playing this one more. This one's not as straightforward as the other version. There's a lot of there can be at times some obscure plays. For example, one of the plays that I made was using Dangerous to discard a mask change to the graveyard to save myself with the Dreamer, which eventually led to me winning. Most people would never discard mask change with Dangerous, but for me, that's what caused me to win the game. It's something that needed to happen because I don't think I would have been able to win otherwise. So there's some, it's not like, obviously, they're not super obscure. It's not something crazy, but for the most part, there is some harder plays to consider, and there's more plays to consider, which is probably why I like this version more. You're not so limited to your win condition. You have other ways to win, so you can play around those. 2 copies of Malicious is what we're running here. Go ahead and jump into the cards. Malicious is huge, is really huge for this deck in my opinion. He's just one of the kind of MVP. He's everybody's pretty MVP in this deck, but Malicious is really strong. Being able to fuse him into Dangerous and then get another summon out of that fusion is really powerful. It gives you another monster on the board for protection. He can also be saved by Dreamer. And then additionally, the really cool thing is Mask Change does, he's one of the targets for Mask Change, so you just get a free Mask Change target sometimes with him, and it's really good a card. He's really good to have available to you. There's many ways that this deck can get him into the graveyard. Vion can send him to the graveyard, Dangerous can, and then you can just fusion him out, or even Destiny Draw, send him to the graveyard. Destiny Hero Decider is another card. He's used to get one hero monster from your graveyard and put it into your hand. Really good way at recycling some of your monsters. Gets you another vision hero potentially. He can also be comboed pretty well with Dangerous in order to get you, like if you need to dump your entire hand in order to get Dangerous out, you can use him to make sure dumping that entire hand leaves you with one card to discard for his effect. And so there's a lot of like combos and ways to kind of play around Decider and Dangerous. So 3 copies of Celestial. He is one of the best graveyard effects in the game, which lets you draw 2 cards whenever you are out of cards in your hand. So you see a lot of use out of this card. Dangerous can send him to the graveyard. Celestial can send him to the graveyard. Lots of ways to send these various hero monsters to the graveyard in this version of the deck. And then I run 1 copy of Dreamer in order to protect my Destiny Hero monsters. Dreamer is poggers. There's so many times when he saved me from dying, and I really do recommend having at least one of him. 3 mass chains. For playing masked heroes, you kind of need 3 mass change. Sometimes you can get away with 2, but optimally you need 3. 2 Forbidden Chalice. This is the true MVP of the meta right now. Forbidden Chalice is a quick play spell that can negate monster effects, and it can also be used in the damage step thanks to its 400 thanks to it boosting the attack of that monster as well by 400 points. Flip effects happen during damage calculation, so Sylvan Kamashumo being flipped up if you attack into him, any of the Gearsha monsters as well being flipped up if you attack into them. Those are flip effects essentially. I mean, for some reason they're classified differently, but they're essentially flip effects. They flip up and then their effect happens, and that's the damage calculation step. And unless your card is a counter trap, which is quick play, which is a spell speed of 3, or can affect damage in some way, or affect the attack of something or defense of something in some way, it can't be applied during that step. And so things like masked change actually don't work. So don't attack into Kamashumo thinking you can just change your monster or mask change your monster into Anki before it destroys it with something like Martial Leaf. That's not how that works. I've made that mistake a few times myself. Don't feel bad about it, but just don't attack into the monster if you don't have a means of negating it during damage calculation. Make sure you remember that. There's a lot of flip effects with Gears and Sylvans running around. Just kind of keep that in mind. Otherwise, you're going to want to set this card. Really good way to deal with that kind of stuff. Destiny Draw, already kind of talked about it. Really good way of sending Malicious to the graveyard, and you do run a lot of Destiny heroes, and it does draw you 2 cards, get you a little bit closer to some of your win conditions with Mask Change, Chalice. 2 enemy controllers. This is a really strong card. Targets 1 face-up monster your opponent controls and changes that target's battle position. And then the most powerful effect that everybody uses to win their games is tribute 1 monster and steal it. If your opponent has a big boy that you can't get over, just take it and use it to kill him. There's so many ways to play with this card that it's pretty much been the best card in the game for a very long time now. Pretty staple card in a lot of decks these days. 90% of decks run 3 copies of them, so I'm pretty sure most of you know why or about enemy controller at this point. Then my single polymerization. There have been many times in which I wanted to fuse out into Trinity kind of mid-duel, like turn 5 or 6, but I had already fused into Dangerous, so I couldn't. So for that reason, I would recommend trying to fit in a second copy of Poly into your deck. You can even run 21 cards if you're feeling that way. Destiny Draw helps you get through 21 cards a little bit nicely, so it's not like a terrible amount of cards to have. A lot of people have ran it like this, where they only run 1 copy of Decider. I wouldn't drop the Dreamer, and I definitely wouldn't drop the Dreamer, and I probably wouldn't drop the Destiny Draw. I actually think they're pretty solid. And so if I were to run the second copy, I would probably want it to be something like this. But unfortunately, I only ran 1. This was the deck list that I used right here. If you want to take a look for yourself, I didn't change it at all throughout the entirety of the KC Cup Stage 2. This was it, 100%. I grinded it out. Obviously, if you're looking for other recommendations, you can consider Trunade and Cosmic Cyclone, back row removal cards. There were a lot of times which I kind of wish I had them, but there were a lot of times where I felt like if I did draw them, it would be a dead card. So it's kind of up to you. It's a bit kind of a toss-up. Most of the time I was able to grind through back row. The only troublesome back row, like the most troublesome back row for me, was Ultimate Providence. I'll talk about those when I get to Sylvans. And then Pulse Mines was another one that I did kind of wish I could get rid of with other back row removal or disruption. But most of the time I was able to power through those various card choices or back row cards and even like come out on top. There was like one duel where the Gearsha player managed to draw all 3 copies of his Pulse Mines. That kind of sucked, but he got all of the top decks. Can't really complain too much because it's not my fault. Luck was on his side. He had heart of the cards. So anyway, let's jump into some of the matchups. Sylvans, as you may expect, were the most popular, followed by Masked Heroes, Gearshas, and Archfiends. Those were the top 4 decks. Those were the most common decks that I saw as a player. Sylvans being one of the most popular, followed Masked Heroes probably being about the second most popular. Gearshas I didn't see as much, and I actually saw quite a bit of Archfiends myself. So that was those were the 4. We'll go ahead and jump into Sylvans. Sylvans, you're going to want to restart into Chalice, Mass Change almost all the time. Sylvans are extremely easy if you get these 2 in your opening hand, especially if your opponent, if you go first, that's pretty good for you. So I would highly recommend if you could open up with these 2 and go first, that's really solid. Obviously you can't choose which one you go first. If you go second, you do have to deal with the Ultimate Providence. Probably the most important or the most problematic card out of the Sylvans arsenal is Ultimate Providence. They run all monsters, so negating monster effects is their main priority with that card, and you're running monster effects too. Ultimate Providence was probably the most problematic card that I ran into versus Sylvans, and probably just in general even, because negating my monster effects really caused me a lot of issue, especially since a lot of the times I opened with Vion, and I really wanted Vion to send stuff to the graveyard. So there were a couple of duels where I just couldn't do that. They would negate my Vion. A couple of duels where I had to settle with Vion not sending stuff to the graveyard, and it can be a bit of a pain trying to kind of play around that sort of negation property that they can have available to them pretty much any time. It also prevents you from being able to search another mask change off of Anki's ability. So the one single card that I wish that I had back row removal for was Ultimate Providence. There was several duels where if I had Cosmic Cyclone in my deck and I played it on that Ultimate Providence, I could have won that turn. But unfortunately, I did not run any back row removal, so I kind of had to, I had to play around it. Other than that, most of the time, like I said earlier, Sylvans, don't attack into them if you don't think you can deal with the mushroom effect or merchant effect flipping over. It's a damage step activation, so you can't do anything else. Your econs, your mask changes, none of those get popped. You're done for once you attack into the Sylvan. I would highly recommend letting them do their own flipping and then potentially negating it, or like you kind of, if you don't have the negation available to you, if you didn't get to restart into your Forbidden Chalice, which obviously happens, then you kind of just have to, go the long haul. Sylvans is one of the decks that I really wish I had 2 polys for as well. There were some duels in which I was able to survive their big onslaught of, you know, monster summoning, and then they would end up with 3 monsters on their field, you know, right after trying to kill me in 1 turn. If I had a second copy of Poly and could search it out, I would have been able to fuse into Trinity and, you know, just Trinity crush them with his ability, with his huge 5k damage output and 3 attacks. Mid duel Trinity crushing people is something that I really wish I had more access to. Being able to, like, once the Sylvans get their effects popping, most of the time they're getting 3 big boys out. They're going to get their Carrot Weight, they're going to get their Deku Tree, and they're definitely going to get their Guardioak out. And so what does Trinity do? He just crushes all 3 of them immediately and gives you games. So really good card that I wish I did have. Like, he's the main reason, or Sylvans are one of the main reasons I wish I had my other Poly so that I could fuse into the Trinity. Girjas and Masked Heroes are the other 2. I faced less Girjas than anything. Most of the time, the Girja monsters, if they manage to get their back row cards pop in, then you kind of just have to deal with that. Obviously, or one of the best ways to deal with Girjas is enemy controller. If they pop their if they pop their Ties of the Brethren, you can actually steal their monster that they target with it, and they can't activate, or they can't do the summon off of the Ties. It's a really powerful effect that you can kind of get rid of just by using enemy controller, and it most of the time, if I did that to one of them, they just kind of surrendered right after that. They take 2,000 life points to activate Ties of the Brethren as well. So if they don't get the summon off, and you stole their monster, there's pretty much nothing that they can do at that point. They can try to stall you out, but they're pretty low on resources. Additionally, there was a lot of times which they ran back row cards to flip their monsters over on my turn. Something like Desert Sunlight comes to mind, where they can use it to flip their own monsters. And at that point, you want to use Econ as well, because once their effects are activated, they can't stop it. So they have to destroy monsters or spell and trap cards based on how many Girjas are on the field. So you can steal their own monster and force them to make a tough decision on who they want to destroy, because they'll have to destroy their own monster at that point. So really good. Enemy controllers are a really good way of dealing with Girjas. Really helped me a lot in that matchup. For the mirror match versus other Masked Heroes, that was my most problematic matchup, as far as I can say. I lost a lot of duels to the mirror match. There was a lot of it was misplays. I recognized those misplays, immediately after the duel, but there was just something about the matchup that caused me a lot of trouble. There were a lot of times where my opponent just felt like they drew all 3 mask changes and summoned the Drill Dark, summoned the Celestial, because a lot of them were playing the other version of it where they just get the Anki out. So if I couldn't survive their onslaught, I just lose. So that happened a couple times. And then there was a couple of duels where they managed to drop me pretty low, but they had too many monsters on the field, so I couldn't out their monsters really too easily, and they just attacked me directly for a game right after. So Masked Heroes did give me a lot of trouble. I was able to win out a lot a bit later. I think I got a bit more accustomed to the duel, but early on, Masked Heroes gave me a lot of trouble. The best thing about that matchup, you can actually Econ take their monster and use Mask Change on their monster. So if you Econ steal their Dangerous, you can Mask Change their own Dangerous. And that's a really good way at outing their monster, as well as giving you an opening for attack. So that's about that matchup. The Archfiend matchup was also kind of a coin toss. Archfiends was another matchup that I really wanted a second polymerization for. Most of their monsters are 3,000 attack points or higher. The other Archfiend Empress is 2,900, so most of them are stronger than your Masked Hero. And so there was a lot of duels which I really needed the Trinity. They also have been running a new one called Invader of Darkness. It's not really new, but it's a tech card that they've been running called Invader of Darkness, which it prevents your opponent from playing quick play spells. So that was a card that people were playing. I didn't actually see that myself, thank goodness, because that would have been pretty frustrating. As you can see, my deck list has a ton of quick play spells, so getting cucked like that's would have been really annoying. I didn't see any of that, but still, their big boys were really big and hard to get around. Most of the time, I either attacked them directly with Anki, or I just econ took their monster using it against them. So that about sums it up for all of the matchups. The restart, I'll go ahead and briefly discuss restart situations. If you draw both of your malicious, get rid of them. If you draw one malicious and have no way of discarding it, get rid of that hand. So if you don't have this or this or this in your hand with malicious, get rid of it. You're going to want to fuse malicious out, get them into the graveyard in any way possible. Most of the time you do kind of want to draw into Mask Change Forbidden Chalice, but it's not like a huge requirement. Starting with Vion is pretty strong as well. Most of the time, a lot of my openers were fusing out with Dangerous and then using his effect or having Malicious in the graveyard to get two monsters on the field, and I put both of them in defense mode so that they can't be econ took and used against me in that fashion. And then a lot of times I would throw Dreamer into the graveyard as well in order to help protect my monsters. And if they didn't destroy my Dangerous or my Dreamer, or if I didn't need Dreamer, then I would discard Celestial off of Dangerous's effect and start popping off my next turn. Like it kind of snowballed right after that. You know, once you get the Dangerous and you keep him alive for that first turn, you're pretty much good to go. So that's kind of how I opened a lot of duels. And if you didn't open that way, then you definitely want to open with the Mask Change combo. Using Vion to send Malicious to the graveyard, so you have two targets for Mask Change is pretty solid. And then obviously having Econ is not terrible either. You can protect yourself with that. So that about sums it up. It was a really fun experience. I was really happy with myself with it. So I really hope in the future I have the same amount of fun playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively like that. So far I'm having a blast. I can't really complain. So I'm really happy that I'm still enjoying the game after so long. Really hope I do well in the Worlds. I kind of want that nice little, I want that trip to Japan for World Championships. But I don't know if I'm that good or not yet. We'll kind of find out, I suppose. So I really hope this video helped you understand Masked Heroes maybe a bit more. Maybe understand some of the matchups. And I hope that it helped you in the long run. So thank you guys so much for watching. Really hope that you enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Later.